Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table. We're here as always on Tuesday morning to bring you something we feel that may be important to your life, to your knowledge, or a combination of the two. Joining me as always is my co-host, Ronleen Kennedy. Good morning, Ronleen.
Good morning, Earl. How are you feeling this morning?
Well, it's a holiday, so I guess everyone is feeling pretty good. For those of us who don't really have to go into the office, as they say, so it's a good day. Celebrate the 4th of July, and I'm sure a lot of cooking is going on today.
It has been for the whole weekend.
I think people will rather have the 4th of July on a Monday or a Tuesday. That way they can have a longer weekend. Tuesday is ideal because you can always just take Monday off and just roll it over into Tuesday, so you can be off Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, as opposed to Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and have to go back to work Tuesday. But however you cut it up, yeah, a lot of cooking has been going on since probably Friday. There's some creative people. They started their 4th of July weekend on Friday as far as a vacation. So for those of them who might have been traveling, they start traveling on Thursday so they can get in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, travel on Monday, and relax when they get back home on Tuesday, I guess. Or if not, just have 5 days and enjoy themselves, and whatever happens, happens.
Yes. I know I saw the fireworks at the church on Sunday and it was great. So I'm like, I feel like I'm already in this holiday and looking forward to the fireworks that's going to be happening this evening, actually.
Okay, well, I'm sure that the vendors who sell fireworks, I don't know if this will be a down year for them, but I'm sure it doesn't matter because folks are going to be shooting off fireworks. Man, just as it probably won't even get dark good before people start shooting things off to celebrate. But nonetheless, we'll get through it. So today, July the 4th, we are celebrating, uh, and it's ironic. I didn't think about it when I thought about bringing this topic to our viewers and listeners because it is Independence Day, and that's interesting in itself. Independence Day, independent of what? Independent of British rule. That's what that was about. Being independent of British rule here in the United States. They fought to get from under the hand of the king or the queen, but mostly the king. So July the 4th, that's what we're celebrating. But our topic today is titled Not So Supreme Court.
Mm.
Not So Supreme Court. And this all has to do with the decisions that the United States Supreme Court made last week in three cases that are just so impactful. But the one we're going to be focusing on today will be the one where they struck down a law that had been around 60 plus years. It's being struck down is as impactful as when they struck down and overturned the Roe versus Wade decision. So the SCOTUS, as they are called, Supreme Court of the United States, has ruled on 12 cases within the past 12 months, and three being crucial to the racial divide of this country. Their rulings are helping to make racial divide in this country more arduous and more very tense. So the decision they made about affirmative action and rolling that back is very, very sad because that affirmative action stems from something that happened over 100 years ago. So I'm going to give a little background about how we got to the affirmative action in our school systems. and how things have gone forward, and now what this looks like with the Supreme Court striking this down. So in 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in the Plessy versus Ferguson case that racially segregated public facilities were legal. Racially segregated public facilities were legal, comma, so as long as the facilities for black people and white people were equal. Now, it's interesting for those of us who grew up in the time of segregation when we talk about equal. Now, most of us would think equal mean the same, and from a legal standpoint, not quite so much, because you can have separate and the same facility or the same type things, but the quality of those two things can be extremely different. And when we had segregation, there used to be two bathrooms for men, two bathrooms for women, two water fountains. So the facility itself, or the equipment itself, or however they wanted to make that, they were the same, but they weren't of the same quality. So one water fountain over here that's labeled white, and one water fountain over here labeled black. What was the difference? The water from one fountain was a lot colder than the water that came out the other fountain. Equal, but not the same quality. So the Supreme Court sanctioned laws barring black people from sharing the same buses, schools, and other facilities. That's what this came down to. So we're going to focus in on sharing same schools, because that's what we're dealing with the affirmative action in their case, because it dealt with affirmative action at the college level. And for those of us who are familiar with what this was called, in short, it was called Jim Crow. And Jim Crow established a separate but equal doctrine that stood for six decades. From 1896, they say 6 decades, a little bit longer than that, but that's the way it went into the 50s. But by the early 50s, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, worked to change laws in public schools and filed lawsuits on behalf of citizens in South Carolina, Virginia, and Delaware. So in the case that we are most familiar with, Brown versus the Board of Education, I think most times when we think about segregation, we zero in on how it was so poignant and so well seen and probably overly used in the South. But the Brown versus Education case happened in Topeka, Kansas. And, we hear Brown versus Board of Education, but no one's ever told us who Brown was. We just accept the fact that we're Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Just like in today's time, the United States versus Donald Trump, if you want to understand it better. But a man by the name of Oliver Brown filed a class action lawsuit against the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education in 1951 after his daughter, Linda, was denied entrance to an all-white elementary school in Topeka, Kansas. This is 1951. So in the lawsuit, it claimed the schools for black children were not equal to white schools. and that segregation violated the so-called 14th Amendment, which the 14th Amendment says equal protection, which holds that no state can deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So he filed a complaint because he felt that his child should have an opportunity to go to the school he wanted her to go to. So from 1951 to 1952, he was kind of fighting this on his own, but um, the NAACP got involved, and the court combined the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka uh, into a landmark Supreme Court case. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court justices, unanimously, all nine of them agreed that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. And this, so they say, Brown versus the Board of Education, was just one of the cornerstones to the civil rights movement. And it helped establish precedent. And I'm using some of these words specifically simply because what the Supreme Court did last week on June 30th, 2023, set precedents. They went back against a precedent and basically erased it. So separate but equal education and other services were not in fact equal at all. Were not equal at all. And I recall days of going to school in elementary school where when we would get our books, I know that might be a foreign term for kids in this day and time to have to take books home, but we had to get books, and you got a book for all your subjects, for reading, for math, and for science, uh, maybe for history. And you went to the book room, and in class by class, your class would get your books. Some books would be in excellent shape. Some books would be in very good shape. Some would be in good shape. And others were just deplorable. Uh, Things written through them, names written on the books. I mean, just horrible books. So if you got a good book that had, and then pages missing. So when other schools, white schools, were getting books, they got brand new books. We got passed down the books that they had already used, which meant, if from an educational standpoint, we could almost be maybe a year behind in learning, because if the books were a year old, maybe some of the subject matter was a year old, and you don't catch up because you're behind. But anyway, the courts set a precedent and ruled that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. They did this in 1954. 1954. Here we are almost 70 years later, and the Supreme Court of the United States of America has determined that using race as a way to get into colleges, white colleges most notably, is unconstitutional. So, the Brown versus Board of Education case was argued by then NAACP attorney Thurgood Marshall, who became the first Black person to be appointed to the Supreme Court, and he was appointed by President Lyndon Johnson. Now, briefly, President Johnson may have been one type of guy when he was in the Senate from Texas. He was from Texas, He may have been another kind of guy when he was in the House of Representatives, when he represented Texas, but he was a totally different person when it came to being the president of the United States because a lot of civil rights laws and decisions came on his watch. And he only served one full term as the president and a half of a term, maybe, as a president after the assassination of President Kennedy. But Lyndon Johnson is the man who made a lot of civil rights actions happen. So let's fast forward to last Friday, and by a 6-3 vote, the Supreme Court voted along party lines, 6 Republican appointees in the majority, and the ruling on affirmative action was that this was not constitutional to enroll students based just on race. Now, affirmative action was all about race because if there was not some action affirmatively to balance some of the inequities out, then we would still be dealing with separate, probably, but equal. And I think that lies at the heart of this. But you know, no problem. The two colleges that brought forth these cases about admission policies, Harvard, an Ivy League school with an school endowment in the billions, and the University of North Carolina. And Justices Roberts, Kavanaugh, Barrett, Gorsuch, Alito, and our friend, the man who we all thought was going to do a good job in taking Justice Marshall's place, uh, Justice Clarence Thomas. Not to just point at Justice Thomas, however, let's just be fair and honest. As the second black person to sit on the highest court in the land, as a man of color, as a man who grew up in Georgia, as a man who probably had benefits of affirmative action in getting into the college he graduated from and the law school he attended and graduated from, this man voted along party lines and not along what was fair and right. Justices Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan dissented. So, with that being said, Ronleen, I'm going to allow you to weigh in on your thoughts about this whole thing because I still got more to come.
First of all, I want to just say thank you so much for bringing this to light because there are so many questions that have gone unanswered. And I'm thanking you for the times that you have come through the school system from the day that you were born, through all of this dirt. And all I need to say is shame, shame, shame. Um, I was talking with my son today, and I want to dedicate this show to him because he really opened my eyes, as a person who has benefited from affirmative action through colleges, through law school, and to where he is today. I want us, and it gave me a lot of food for thought because, as we were talking about this to bring this to light, Earl, you said something that was so key that the people that we've elected to be our Congress people, to be in our Senate, to represent our state, to represent us locally, this is why voting is so important. When President Biden was addressing this issue and he said this is not normal, one of the reporters was, or a journalist was asking, is it time now that we revisit the term limits for SCOTUS? And of course, he couldn't answer that question because he needed to be on the helicopter to go to wherever he was scheduled to be. And of course, the Supreme Court ruling, he made time to address that, to the nation, but he could not answer the question. But he just left that with, this is not normal. And as my son was saying, if you are a minority, meaning if you are a woman, if whatever it is, if you are not a Caucasian man, then you have benefited from affirmative action. So to allow this to um, be swept away from under us, I'm looking to see what is going to happen now with our new up and coming people, as they're coming into the Senate, as they're coming into the Congress, as they're coming to us on a local playing field. What are they thinking? What is going to be? And why is it important for us to start grooming our younger people to be able to understand what is happening, why they have to be in politics, why we have to vote, why we have to get out there and, do our protesting, whatever it is that we need to do so that people will understand we cannot go back. And it's ironic today that we're bringing this to you on such of a day, supposedly of Independence Day, you know. And so it's like, well, who is really independent? And that is what, everybody want to keep bringing up Colin Kaepernick or what he did. But he wanted us to take a stand and take notice that everything is not equal until everything is equal. So I'm going to turn this back over to you, Earl, because I can go on this rant, and you had a lot to bring to the table today.
Well, you bring about Colin Kaepernick, who was unfairly treated uh, in his efforts to stand up for what he believed in. Uh, he only took a knee and lost his job. He only took a knee, standing up for what he believed in, and he took that knee in an NFL game uh, as an idea that was given to him by a United States military person. And I think we've touched on this before, but when a player goes down on the football field, players take a knee. They take a knee. So, what was so wrong with him taking a knee, other than the fact that at that time we had a president who has taken many knees to avoid things in his whole life?
Yes.
He took a knee to avoid going into the military service. He took a knee when he always talked about, well, he doesn't you know pay any money out in these cases, in these law cases against him, which he has. He so this man influenced the fans and the commissioner and the team owners of the NFL. But aside from that, aside from that, aside from that point, the fact that students of color, specifically black students, because up until recently, the color, whenever you said color, people of color, it always meant black people because brown people were not factors in some of the social aspects of this country back in the 50s and the 40s, in the 40s and the 60s and 70s. Uh, People who are Native Americans delegated to swatches of land called reservations where they are not counted as a part of America. Uh, you very seldom hear about anything from them or what their plight is or what's going on. Many of them live in horrible conditions, and they were placed forced to live on the patches or parcels of land, excuse me, parcels of land, and basically say, we don't want to hear from you. You just go where we tell you. But Black Americans, having suffered through that one blemish on American history called slavery, have risen up over time and fought for their rights, equality, justice, truth, and as the slogan goes, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. There will be no peace until there is justice. Well, we were not going to have any peace for a long time right now with the justices. Isn't that interesting? No justice, no peace. Well, the justices decided that there is not going to be any peace because you can't have a piece of a college or whatever because of your color, and they want to turn that backwards. All the contributions, significant contributions that Black people have made in this country, and there's still a reason to deny. So this is going to be something that is going to be a challenge in years to come. But I put it all at the doorsteps of colleges who have used affirmative action as a way to enroll Black students and other students of color. You don't have to go by what the Supreme Court has done. You can think for yourself. You can do for yourself. You can say, well, okay, fine, that's what you guys decided, but we're going to stick with the way we've been doing this for years because it works. Diversity is a very good thing. It builds for a stronger and better country. For those of you who want to reverse things, take things backwards, who want to go all the way back to the Plessy versus Ferguson days of 1896, where separate but equal, you don't have to do separate but equal. You can do equal and fair. How about we just do equal and fair? So we're going to see how this works out. But from my vantage point, I think the time has now come when the Supreme Court justices must be relieved of lifetime duty and tenure on the bench and be given anywhere from a 20 to 25-year span where they serve. Mandatory after whatever amount of years you put into place, they step away because they get stuck in their ways or they get influenced, as we've seen recently, by people with money and power. And money and power have more say so than fair and just. And so often, from a perspective of Black people, we've always seen or thought that justice, as she is called, is not always fair to all her citizens in the United States. You know,
Yes, and that's sad that it's like that. I heard a poem, and I can't recite it in its entirety, but it boiled down to, regardless of who I am, what I am, I was human first. I was a human being first.
right,
As a fetus, I was a human being first.
right. And that is where we have to place this fair because any student can contribute to the success and the diversity and the openness of any college. And this is, primarily the reason why we have historically Black colleges and universities because we were denied.
Mhm.
So when you're denied, you find a way to make a way. So again, the action taken by the Supreme Court to reverse affirmative action at the college at the educational level, we're going to see where this goes. We're going to see how what schools are going to be have some integrity and be about fair and just and doing things from that perspective. We're at the halfway point of our show here today on the Kitchings Table. We hope that we are bringing something to you today that will enlighten you and inspire you. And if you have anything that you would like to share with us, a comment, uh, please send it into the station, and we'll be more than happy to receive it and share it when we get it. But this is the Kitchings Table, heard every Tuesday morning, and we welcome you to our show today. Our topic is Not So Supreme Court. Not So Supreme Court. Speaking of the fact that this Supreme Court has ruled on three significant, significant cases, reversing Roe versus Wade, reversing now affirmative action. I'm not going to even touch the other uh, case they weighed in on because some things have come up recently that may be fraudulent about the case about the businesswoman denying services. So some things are coming out that may be fraudulent about that whole thing, and now the Supreme Court may have been duped and made a wrong decision. But the last thing was President Biden was wanting to, you know, basically erase the debt from a lot of college students who owed on college loans. So what I did, Ronleen, was I'm like, loans. Let's deal with the word loans. Loans, student loans, where students have to take out a loan so that they can attend college, and once they finish with that, that loan is now a burden on them to repay it, which means you got to get a job in order to repay that loan. Now, depending on how much that is, and it's higher for those students who go to graduate school and attain their master's and or doctorate because the cost for classes at the higher level, unbelievable. $200-300 maybe for a master's class, $500-600-700 for a doctoral class. So when you got a debt, and let's not even talk about medical school and what the debt for that is. But let's just start with loans. And the President Biden, wanted to wipe out approximately $400 billion in student debt. He wasn't authorized by Congress. That's one of the things they're saying. He did what the ex-president used to do, just all these executive orders. He used to just like to sign. He never got anything passed in Congress. He just always liked to sign these executive orders. So our current president was wanting to wipe out $400 billion in loans. I'm going to keep emphasizing loan, but again, by a 6-3 majority, the same six versus the same three, they said no. So I thought about that. I said, loans, repaying loans, $400 billion in student debt. The president wanted to wipe out, right? Well, let's talk about another loan program, PPP. Ronnie, would you like to just share with our viewers and listeners what PPP stands for?
Those are those protection loans that businesses received from the SB,
Okay.
Small Business Administration.
Okay, so PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. Paycheck Protection Program. $659 billion in payment protection programs of money that was doled out to people during the COVID situation. $659 billion to help smaller businesses keep Americans employed during the pandemic. Now, I bring this to the forefront because of this. The justices don't want to forgive or waive, I think that's the way they placed it, waive the $400 billion in student debt the president is asking for, $659 billion in Paycheck Protection Program, basically loans. Loans were given out to businesses. And what glares out to me is this. Why is it that members of Congress and their families were not barred from receiving loans under the Paycheck Protection Program? Why were they not barred from receiving this money, this portion of $659 billion? Now, in my research, it stated that no evidence that they received special treatment. You are already a member of Congress, so you're going to get special treatment. What are you talking about? Loans were granted to Democrats and Republicans. Hundreds of millions of dollars was just flowing around. People getting these loans. So I came up with a list. I did a list. And the PPP loan forgiveness, 10.5 million loans. 10.5 million loans worth about $755 billion. So you can do the 659 or the 755. It doesn't matter. It's all $500 billion. And the amount of small businesses to help keep their workforce employees working during the pandemic, fully guaranteed, fully guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. Fully guaranteed. Now, loans worth up to $10 million. Now, here's a college student who's got a $75,000 debt for going to college and looking for a little help. Some businesses got loans up to $10 million. And you know what happened with some of these PPP loans that were done, Ronleen? They set up a program for forgiveness.
Yes,
You
they
could apply
did.
for forgiveness.
Yes.
Now, when you say forgiveness, what does that mean, Earl? Well, let's see now. Forgiveness. Well, you don't have to pay it back.
Hmm. Simply
You don't
said.
have to pay it back. Just don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So you can forgive millions of dollars, but you don't want to forgive these students who are saddled with this debt. So I made this list and I went down the list one by one with the Congress persons, although they didn't get the loans directly. That would have been really double dipping. That should have really caused some reasons for things to be looked into. But the PPP loans made by businesses that some Congress members either owned or had investment in had forgiveness. Had forgiveness. So I wanted to go down the list and just give you the loan amount that is associated with a congressperson, and I'm going to give you the net worth of that congressperson. And let me start off by saying the salary for a senator or a House of Representative member in the United States Congress is $174,000 a year. I'm going to start off with that. $174,000 a year. So I'm going to go down this list because we're talking about loans that the Supreme Court does not want to wipe out, forgive for students who are trying to better themselves, but yet the government is going to forgive loans. Um, and I'm only targeting people in Congress because they're the ones who have the power and the resources, and they make laws And it is kind of sad that they are, or people they know, or family members who own the business, however you want to slice and dice it. I own the business, I'm invested in the business, whatever. So I'm going to start with Matt Gaetz, a Republican from Florida. And please, I'm not wanting to be biased with what I'm saying, but I'm giving it this way simply because the six Republican Supreme Court justices, the six Republican Supreme Court justices who roll this back, I want you to hear of the Republicans who got these PPP loans, what their net worth is, so you'll understand that, okay, the judges roll back loans for students, students, Republican, Democrat, Independent students, just students. But yet we have legislators whose family members got loans and potentially don't have to pay these loans back. They've been forgiven. If you apply for the forgiveness, you got to apply for the forgiveness. So that's the other thing. If you don't apply for it, you got to pay it back, I guess. But you got to apply for the forgiveness of the PPP. So Matt Gaetz, a Republican from Florida, had a loan of $476,000. Matt Gaetz is worth $312,000. Uh, Representative Gregory Pence, a Republican from Indiana, had a $79,000 PPP loan. He's the brother of the former vice president. He's worth $12.6 million. Vern Buchanan had a $2.8 million loan. He's worth $157.2 million. Roger Williams out of Texas. I'm sorry, Kevin Hearn out of Oklahoma. $106 million PPP loan. And again, maybe not directly, but indirectly, they're associated with these loans. $100.07 million. He's worth $38.7 million. Roger Williams, uh, Republican from Texas, loan for $1.43 million. He's worth $67 million. Brett Guthrie out of Kentucky, a loan for $4.3 million. He's worth $13 million. Ralph Norman out of South Carolina took out a loan for, or had a loan taken out under PPP for $306,000 plus. He's worth $18 million. Mike Kelly. Mike Kelly owns car dealerships, just like Vern Buchanan. Vern Buchanan owns car dealerships down in South Florida and North Carolina. But Mike Kelly, a Republican out of Pennsylvania, $974,000. He's worth $12.4. Vicky Hartzler out of Missouri, $451,000. She's worth $939,000. Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican out of Oklahoma. So there are two Republicans on the list, just like there are two Floridians on the list. Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican out of Oklahoma, $988,000 loan, worth $16.4. Carol Miller, a Republican out of West Virginia, $3.1 million. She's worth $16 million. And I saved the best for last. Save the best for last. The squeaking wheel in the House of Representatives. Always got something to say. Always, wanting to speak out and speak up, and just a pain in the butt. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene out of Georgia. Her loan was for $181,000. She's worth $56 million. So Roger Williams out of Texas, JRW Corporation. Like I said, Vern Buchanan, car dealerships. Mike Kelly, 4 dealerships, received $150,000 worth of loans each. But Kelly listed that he and his wife earned salaries from Kelly Chevrolet Cadillac. Okay? You earning money from your dealership, you're making money as a congressperson, and you got a PPP loan, but yet you say, justices, don't forgive those student loans. Don't forgive those student loans. Georgia Representative Rick Allen manages his construction firm for decades before heading to Congress. The company that bears his name received at least $350,000, but his wife Robin is the chairwoman of the company. We know how that goes. She's the chairwoman, but yet he knows the boys who divvy out the contracts for the construction. So because she's the CEO, her company is considered a what? Minority company. So she gets some very nice contracts. So when we look at the fact that these representatives, and again, there are Democrats who have done the same thing, but I wanted to focus just on the Republicans because the Republicans are making so many things difficult in this day and time in our country.
And I want to stop right there for you because I'm also a representative for the Employee Retention Credit, affiliate with that to help people receive those credits, the money that belongs to them, their company, if they have 5 employees or more. So imagine the people that you just named. When the Biden administration came on board, it was regardless if you had a PPP loan or a paycheck or participated in the Paycheck Protection Program, you now are eligible for the Employee Retention Credit. So there's a push right now because it ends in April 24th, 2024. So there's a push right now to make sure that if you were operating in business before COVID was declared, that you now have access to that money. And what does that mean? That means that if you had 5 employees or more, your potential of getting $26,000 per employee for those 6 quarters that you were in business. And if you had more than that, just imagine those numbers. That we already see what the PPP looked like. So can you imagine what that's going to look like for them to be able to claim outright the employee retention credit? We're talking millions of dollars for most of most of the people that you've named. That's another couple of $1 million coming back into their business.
Right. But to forgive loans of students
Who's trying to make a way?
who's trying to
Trying,
make a way,
yes,
especially the disadvantaged students.
yes.
Students who must take out these loans because their families can't afford to pay for them to go to school. If they don't get a scholarship, they want to go to college. I couldn't get a scholarship. Well, you can take out a loan and go to school. Okay, I'm gonna take out this loan and pray that I get a job and pray that my job will sustain me enough where I can pay back this loan. Because just like a 30-year house note, you buy $100,000 house on a 30-year house note, you're paying for that house 3 times over, probably. Same thing with these student loans. You get a $50,000 student loan, and they tell you you got to pay it back in 10 years. That's a long time to be paying back $50,000. Unlike if you went out and bought a vehicle for $50,000, your payment will probably be what? Over
$600 to $700.
for 60 months,
Yes.
right? So 60 months is 5 years versus $50,000 for 10 years. But the point is, you won't forgive students who need the help, but you gave out millions of dollars. And I'm sure some of those millions went to some well-deserved businesses. Not knocking that, not diminishing that whatsoever. But the ones who did not need it, who did not need it, or if you did need it and you're not going to have to pay it back, that's okay. You can be okay with that, but not okay for the students to get their loans waived. Yet, how many billions of dollars, and again, not disparaging anything to help someone, but how many billions of dollars have been sent to Ukraine? How many billions of dollars? So see, you can put money and do with money as you choose and will, but for some things that are needed, you say no. This is my point. This is my point. So that is what I wanted to bring to us today, Ron Lean. The two things that the Supreme Court has reversed. Uh, Ironically, they both deal in directly, indirectly with education, and both of them have some connection to money. So it's going to be interesting to see how things go forward. But we wanted to just bring to our listeners and viewers the fact that some things are still not just in a country where we seek truth, freedom, and justice, all under the umbrella of independence and freedom. So that's going to do it for us today here on the Kitchings Table. Hopefully, this information we imparted on you today helped you to be a little bit more knowledgeable of what's going on in the real world and some things that you may not have known. So, Ron Lean, I do thank you for bringing that to us today. I thank you for dedicating the show to your son today.
Yes, he had a lot to say.
So until the next time, I'm your host, Earl Kitchings, for Ron Lee Canada. You say check us out every Tuesday morning here on the Kitchings Table. And as always, do something good for someone else today. Take care, everybody.